why can't I just hire an AE, have them join me on my calls, listen, copy what I do, and then go from there? Like, why doesn't
Yeah.
that should work, right?
Well, I was
Why
going to
not?
say, you can do it, but it isn't going to work. Right? So there's a ton of people who do it. And a lot of times it's often because we're hiring out of necessity and people don't carve out the time to properly onboard and think about systems and processes. And one of the things I was sharing with you earlier, if you hire someone in HR or accounting or operations, you have SOPs, you have standard operating procedures. And unfortunately, when it gets to sales, we're like, oh, it's just an art. It's just talk to people, be extroverted, make friends. And we don't think about the science behind selling. And so I'm a big believer that, if you got one person doing it, that's one thing. But you get to 2, 3, 4, 10, 20, 100. If you don't have something that is repeatable, not one, it's not going to be sellable. But the other thing, it becomes much, much more difficult to manage. If I've got 2, 3, 10 people selling 2, 3, 10 different ways, it's very difficult to even know what's working and what's not working. And so you spend a lot of time trying to manage these individual processes versus having one process that we document and we know that it works.
Mhm. The scariest words I've ever heard other founders say to me is they're trying to grow revenue and they just hired 5 AEs.
Yeah.
And they don't come from a sales background. And I'm like, well, who's managing them? Who's building the process? And like, oh,
Yeah.
they'll figure it out. I'll just keep
Yeah.
the ones that work out. And I was like, you're going to be hiring 5 new AEs pretty soon.
Well, and I think you bring up a great point, Collin, is that I've come into organizations where they've hired sales people that were great account executives in previous roles, but they weren't responsible for building a process. So yes, they were very successful, but those processes were already built. And now they're bringing them in, expecting them to know how to build a process from scratch. And just because people can follow a process doesn't mean that they can build a process.
100%. I love going 0 to 1 and figuring out a new sale and all the things like that is so much fun to me. Going from 1 to, just be repeatable, for the next, N years is not my favorite thing in the world. So I love that going 0 to 1. And I have had reps that hated going 0 to 1, that didn't like it at all. They're like, hey, just give me the script, give me the training, give me this, give me that, talking points, case studies, I'll learn those. And just, they were like Captain Consistency. They wash, rinse, repeat. Love it. Yeah. Great hires. That's not me.
Yeah. But the good thing is that it's not you, right? And I know we're talking a lot about going from 0 to 1 or 0 to 5, but even with the pandemic, right? There are a ton of organizations who were selling like crazy pre-pandemic, and since then their process has to change, right? Because the buyer may have changed, what they're selling may have changed, price when it changed, competition has changed, how they're selling has to change. So even those of you who are like, well, we have an established Salesforce, we have an established process, that doesn't mean that your process doesn't need to be optimized. It doesn't mean that your process still doesn't need to be updated and can benefit from a lot of the things that we'll be talking about today.
100%. And I think my favorite part of this conversation, especially from the pre-interview, was the focus on process. It is one thing. I mean, my early mentor, Joel, would hammered into me, people, process, technology, in that order, because people are literally your business. And then process is the firmware that you teach these people to run. And then technology is basically the stuff that you bring in, the tools that you bring in to enable the process. And if you do it backwards, you start with the technology, you end up with whatever the vendor said, whatever the this, whatever the that, you end up with the standard HubSpot deal outcomes or deal, whatever, the standard Salesforce opportunity stages. And you're like, oh, why do you use those? Oh, well, it's just what it came with Salesforce. It's like, okay, probably should have done the work ahead of time. So I'm a huge fan of the process piece, especially coming before tools.